Okay, so we're recording. Um, so I sent the agenda by email. I did not actually put together slides for today, so I'm not going to be sharing my screen or anything. I'll just be chatting. But what we have on the agenda is I wanted to discuss whether it would be okay with those attending to move this meeting back by half an hour or 60 minutes. I think we originally tried to accommodate as many people as responded, but some of the people that asked for it to be this early haven't actually been showing up, and this has impacted a few other people in California who said that they might have showed up, but 7:30 is too early, which I can sympathize with. Um, so I guess, Chris, this is probably mostly your question, uh, but for today anyway. I don't like I'm able to keep doing it, but it would be nice to me if we could move it back by a short bit. Um,
Um, yeah, I'm okay. There is another group that meets in the next hour that I would want to join. Um,
would 2 hours later be okay? Because
that would be fine.
that
Yeah,
would be fine for
yeah,
me.
yeah.
That's getting
Actually, I
late in the
mean,
day for you, but
yeah, I mean, I'm kind of used to doing evening meetings anyway. So if you wanted to move it, even later in the morning, that would probably be okay too.
all right.
Yeah, Jake, I can't do an hour later, but I could do 2 hours later. An hour later, like the next hour slot for me is Kretsch's staff meeting,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
which is
All right.
basically unmovable.
Yep. Casey, any objections on your side? I think I'm going to float this by the list also and see if anybody raises objections, but I'm kind of gonna
Yeah, since we're
consider downplaying people who haven't managed to attend any yet at this time slot. So,
yeah, and an hour and a half or 2 hours later would be fine with me.
okay. All right. So I will tentatively consider. I'll confirm that on the list and see if there's anybody else who raises objections. But I will look to plan to move this 2 hours later then, if that's okay. Um, all right. So the next item on the list was 20 minutes for a status update. Last month was reasonably busy with both the last meeting we had was the TPAC meeting. Um, that recording is up. I apologize for being so late sending it out. But that recording is up and the notes are there. I guess so I reviewed it again yesterday. I guess uh, my takeaway on that was we aired some of the complexity in getting the kind of adoption we need to move forward. We had opinions from Eric, especially that what we really need to do, is to get more people involved one way or another by getting them to feel the pain. Particularly, I think the browser vendors. But some of the ISPs are on board. I think and Casey here is coming from a network ops side, which is great. There's a few other people that are in the group that haven't really made it to these meetings, but many of whom I've been talking to separately from time to time. But I take it that for most ISP employees, it's a challenge to do work toward browser implementation sort of development. This is not usually in the sort of wheelhouse uh, of who they're employing, although it can depend on who and where they want to invest. Um, but really it's about kind of getting the uh, you know, if we can get it into the browser. My take on this at this stage is getting it into the browser is the step that makes it most interesting to everybody, because then there's a distributed receiver that anybody can use. And so to that end is kind of, I didn't hear anything that really changed my position on, yeah, we have to get the security stuff ironed out, and we have to get some level of consensus built so that the browsers would be potentially willing to take it. I guess anybody else who saw anything different, do let me know. That was kind of my summary takeaway on it, is that we're on the right track. It's not an easy or short track, but uh, but we're but we're trying to do the right sorts of things based on the, who needs to be into this. So as follow up on that, I guess if there's no other questions or comments there, yeah, then
I think you're right that getting it into the browser is critical to finding that breakpoint.
yeah,
And you're also right that we're more than willing, actually enthusiastic about helping to provide relays, and as soon as Internet 2 will allow us to build those overlays, we'll get ourselves back connected to others so that becomes more useful. But
great, yeah,
you're also right that it's difficult for us as a network to help on the browser development side because we just don't have staff that really work in that area. But yeah,
yep,
still willing to help, and I think you're on the right track.
okay, good, thank you. Great. Yeah, so to that end, then the other big event of the month was IETF, was a couple weeks after the TPAC. So I presented in both SecDispatch and MBOND. The summary from SecDispatch was that we are dispatched to the MSEC mailing list for further discussion. MSEC is a working group that got closed 4 or 5 or 6 years ago, I think. But the mailing list is still there, still present. I haven't followed up yet, but I will be. I mean, I haven't followed up seriously. I did ping the MSEC list to verify that. During the session, there was some question: should it be MSEC or should it be a new mailing list? I pinged MSEC to ask. I got unanimous responses from 2 people that that MSEC seems like a good place for it, for the discussion about the security considerations for multicast. Likewise, I heard from one of the area directors that seems like a good place. So I'm going to go ahead and send out an invite on the SecDispatch list, asking people to please join and start the discussion off there. Any of you that are willing and able, please do consider joining the MSEC IETF list for discussing the security properties and see what kind of people bring up. There was some discussion on the SecDispatch list from Ecker. That was kind of after the TPAC meeting, mostly, I think, and then some good discussion during the session, I think. I guess my summary is that people who are into security are skeptical of this, which I think is not entirely unjustified. But I think that so Ecker did a review of the draft, and he seems to think it's not a good idea, but he didn't have any technical objections that he maintained throughout during that discussion that we had. he ended up in the position that, well, browsers aren't interested in this, so why should we bother looking at it? You know, which I think matches with our current goals, except that you know, I think Ecker is associated with some browser work, and I tend to get similar responses from other people who are in the browsers. I had some offline communications. They're not public, and I don't want to name any names, but some of these have contributed to my view that people who are into browser security tend to be skeptical toward this. I think it will help to get the sort of web transport integration running, so that there's an actual. This was also one of the comments in the chat during the sec dispatch presentation. I think from Martin, another luminary in the sort of security and browser space, Martin Thompson, and that was that we needed we need to have an actual protocol with actual security properties before we can meaningfully discuss this. And I think that's not an unreasonable position. And so I don't entirely agree, because I do think that the security considerations doc lays out a lot of things that we need to hit in that protocol, and has a good framework for sort of thinking about it, and I think is appropriate as a separate doc. But in addition, I think they're saying that we're going to need to get something running that would be a sort of first stage proposal at how to do the secure transport with web transport, or something else. But I think that you know, to go along with that, one of the other notions was like a sort of origin linked authentication of the objects that were delivered. The suggestion was to dispatch to CDNI, but that might be worth exploring in some sense, to sort of see whether the origin can actually provide a response that validates the total receipt of everything. I'm not sure it's necessary the way we're doing the authentication, but I wouldn't say it's entirely off the table. But I'm going to see if we can do something just with datagrams and web transport first. I started setting up like a local web transport, the web platform test to run web transport against some browsers, and then I'll be hacking on that. I got sidetracked with IP6 dual stack work, which of course took much longer than I was expecting. So I'll speak about that a little bit, but let me first pause and ask if there's any comments or questions on the sec dispatch, MSec sorts of things.
Do you think it's likely that in doing this we will gain the browser vendors' support? I kind of worry that if they're saying, well, we're not interested in this, like, at what level is it we're not interested in this because we think that the security properties are like, that's too hard of a problem to solve? Or is it like, even if we were to develop a solution there that we think is acceptable, then there are other reasons perhaps that they're not really interested to take this up?
Nobody yet has, privately or publicly, has given me any indication that this problem is unsolvable, that they believe this problem is unsolvable. I've asked that question explicitly to a number of people. All of them have declined to take that position yet.
Mike, if I can speculate a little bit, my guess is that it just doesn't fit into their mental model at the moment of how the web works, that they just haven't put a lot of thought into it, and so they're unwilling to commit one way or the other because they just don't know enough yet.
Yeah.
And that's
That
also the
said,
audacity of Hope saying that as well.
sure.
So
Yeah. With that said, I should say that that there is a position that it's going to be a high effort to update the web security model to allow for this. That there's this seems to be the default position of this is part of why I think the people who've done a lot of web security work tend to be skeptical, is that this is they view this as challenging because it's different, and their default position is that it's probably not worthwhile. Um, in particular, not worthwhile for them. I think most of them have not commented yet on the sort of claim as about how much traffic could be saved, how much energy usage could be saved. So I really think that, to me, it looks like they have not considered this problem seriously yet. Yeah. Um, and it might, uh, is it likely that they will come around once they do consider it? I tend to think so, but that might be my own biases speaking here. This is uh, the alternatives do not help, in my opinion, with user safety. Like, what they're saying is this can't be in browsers, not that users will be safer by keeping it out of browsers. Um, and this is and the reason is because users end up doing something that scales anyway, because that's their only option for some of the content they want to receive. And the things that scale have the same exact privacy problems.
can you
Um,
can you restate that? I didn't understand what you meant by that.
so yeah. For example, when you can't deliver it to a browser, and it's a high volume sort of event, what you end up doing is, in order to deliver the high volume event, you use a TV station kind of approach, right? You send it to the ISP, who sends it to their customers. And now what you've done, the net effect of saying, well, it can't be delivered over the web, it's too big. The net effect that you end up with now is, okay, so we deliver it through the ISP uh, by handing it to them explicitly, and then they give it to their customers as part of their
Right.
service offering. Right.
Right. The alternative is not, oh well, I guess we're not going to do it. I guess we're not going to view this
Yeah.
content. The content's going to get delivered. It's just going to get delivered in a proprietary and probably less, a proprietary manner that has not undergone the kind of privacy review that we would expect from a standardized
Right.
IETF W3C collaboration.
Yeah. And in fact, I hope to do exactly that with the game delivery, for example. So this wouldn't be done through a browser. This would be, integrated to gaming platforms and start receiving game delivery. Um, Likewise, I hope to do this um, with the sort of smart TV devices. In some of the specific ones for some of the specific content owners that need to do some delivery.
God, I hope
Um,
nobody finds out that I'm playing Stardew Valley. Not just kidding.
um, yeah, I mean, you know, it is a concern that people would find out what content is being delivered. That's one of the ones that's been raised. Um, Part of the response is that it's, well, when it's popular enough, then that's very discoverable anyway through traffic analysis. This is even mentioned in the TLS specs, um, as a thing that TLS is vulnerable to. Um, and there's a never-ending stream of papers about how that works. You can defeat it, but only by making all the content look identical. which has a very high overhead because everything has to be at the size of whatever you're trying to hide it within. So you have to have everything be at the same size as the biggest thing you're sending, essentially, or a large volume of stuff being at that size. And people aren't willing to do that, right? It's like, well, you're saying we're gonna triple the traffic that we're gonna send, so that we can protect our users from from their ISP discovering, if they bother to look, that they're downloading Call of Duty. What are they going to do with that information? Why is this a threat model we have to pay 3 times as much for delivery to actually prevent? And the answer is they don't do it today, and there's no reason to think that they're going to do it for the popular content. And yet, you know, in like by telling them we can't use multicast, well, we're telling them that no, you have to do 30 times as much traffic instead. And I'm not sure why this is a different answer exactly, except that I think people haven't really thought through all the implications yet, as far as I can tell. There's this sort of getting people to take it seriously problem that multicast has, that I think is each new group that encounters it has to overcome that. And yeah, all the web security stuff over the last decade has been done without any considerations for multicast. So we'll have to sort of rebuild that in the multicast world, and do find out where there really are user threats, because it is very important not to expose users to that. Like I don't mean to diminish their concerns, but I think that most of the concerns that people have are coming from a place of not having yet engaged with the problem seriously, and with the problems they're raising, and what the actual impact on users is. And the scalability, it's something that's hard to turn your back on once you understand how big it is. So that's kind of where we stand. It's going to be an uphill climb to get people to start looking at it. There's a bit of an uphill climb. I think some people will look at it, but
the argument for, just the simple argument for let's make it part of the web security model so that we kind of bring it into the light is something that we should probably add to the doc, unless you think it's too on the nose. But it seems like a framing that would be that some percentage of people who are interested in the question would be receptive to. I mean, other people would disregard that, but I think it feels like it would be net positive to mention it.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that's a point that Lucas raised. Like, this is reminiscent of the sort of what was the one you pointed out? Like a decade ago, or even a few years ago, with
getting
like
rid of
DNS,
Flash.
right?
Oh, DNS. Okay, yeah.
So DNS has turned into a privacy consideration, sort of a thing, and it was like, well, 8 years ago, it wasn't really on anybody's radar, and over the last 8 years, it's turned into like, well, everybody's making encrypted connections to their DNS now, or there's a large portion of people that are doing it, and people were scraping all that DNS data, and now it's only the particular provider that you've chosen that gets to scrape that DNS data, not everyone on the path. And so there's sort of an analogy here where there is a bunch of multicast traffic happening today. Nobody knows what people are analyzing it and what they're getting out of it. And so, if there is really a privacy problem here, then it's a privacy problem that's present today. And it's something that we should be thinking about and discussing. If there's not actually a privacy problem, then I'm not sure why it's a blocker to getting it into the browsers in general. So that's kind of the state of the discussion. I agree it should go into the doc. Yeah, that's a good point to raise. I don't know. You wanna make an issue for it or add? Okay.
Yeah, I'll do
Thanks,
that.
yeah.
Ignore the message I just sent you until the end of the meeting. I just didn't want to forget it. So
Yeah, fair. Let's see. So, I think that's about it. It's I'm hoping to get that discussion going between now and the March IETF and kind of see where things stand. I don't know if we'll be ready for a BOF yet at the March IETF, but I'd like to, you know, maybe if the discussion goes well, but over the holidays it really never does. So, but I'd like to get a BOF at some point to reopen MSEC and take this document on, as well as some of the others that I listed in the Sec Dispatch presentation, and get the actual IETF consensus there. So that project will be ongoing. In parallel, I'll be doing the web platform tests for web transport and seeing if I can get together an actual, you know, at least a start at a strawman protocol that has the actual characteristics that I'd be looking to start with. You know, focused specifically on web transport, the first one in our charter for the multicast CG. So the reason I'm not farther along on that, segueing to my next point on the agenda, was the dual stack relays. I tried to set some up. So the where I'm running them is there's some test traffic on 23.212.185.2 as the source, and then 232.1.1.1 with port 5001. I can paste that into the chat here if you want to paste it into the notes there, Chris. And those, I'm bringing them up and down still. There's still some pieces that I haven't been able to properly test or get working. But the relays, I'm trying to get functioning. And then my intent is to, so Giant also has brought up some multicast capability in their multicast working group. They actually have like a beer forward plane, and some pretty neat relays running. They gave me an idea because they're playing some public domain music over their multicast channel, which you can just leave running. You don't have to be watching it, right? So I might do the same for some of my sources with through VLC, where you can just leave it running and listen to some music. I think that would be a good way to have it just active all the time, so I can notice if there's problems. But anyway, the relay there is theoretically running in dual stacked. I still am working on trying to get it functioning. You can do the discovery through DNS for that source. I'm working on getting a v6 source together. I guess I can, that address would be, I'll paste that one too, although I don't have the sender up yet, unfortunately. Every part of the IP6 work is taking longer than I would wish. Unfortunately, there's challenges in the there's challenges at the AWS level, just getting that dual stack functioning. But that part is the part that's working. But then inside the device that's running there, it's not behaving the same. So if this is an Ubuntu sender, in IP4, what I'm doing is I create a VETH pair, and I just set the route to send it to one side of the VETH pair. The relay listens on the other side of that VETH pair, and that's how I get the traffic into the relay to be distributed to whoever's trying to get it. Unfortunately, with IP6, for reasons I've not yet been able to track down, setting the route does not seem to be sufficient. It's going out the physical interface, whether or not I have a route to go to the thief pair interface. And I'm waffling between setting this up inside a net namespace versus so I know from previously working on it that if I set it up as a separate device, then the multicast traffic will not transfer between the two AWS instances. So you have to tunnel it, which means you have to get it into the relay somehow, or into some other kind of tunnel. I don't know yet why the routing isn't behaving the way I expect it to, and I think the network namespace is the most promising way to force it. I thought about trying it in a VRF also. I might, but that seems like it has challenges too. Anyway, I've been on this for a couple of weeks now. I'm hoping to actually end up with it running, but it's not what I wish it was, for sure. So I guess anyone who wants to work on that with me, please do let me know, and I'll hook you up and see if you can help me troubleshoot it. But yeah, it's not fantastic. But that one, when I do set it up, does have the same sort of. I did get the relay discovery part working for that, so that doing the same dryad lookup with the reverse IP of the source address does find the relay that it's supposed to be running on. I just don't have actual traffic sending there. So I might give this another week before I abandon it, but I'm hopeful that in a week I'll get through all the hoops that need to happen. But I really do want to get onto the quick bit, so I'm and the web transport part. And I feel like this IP6 digression is important because there's several people who are really interested in making this work for IP6, but not my core mission here either. So so I don't want to let it go for too long if I really can't get it. I guess any questions about that? I'd be happy to dive into more details, but I'm not sure it's the right place. All right. Great. Then let's see. Did I have? Yeah. So I guess just in terms of next steps, my plan was to kick off that MSEC discussion and to continue on the web transport, trying to get something working. I hope to have that by the next meeting. We'll see how it goes. And I think that's all I had on the agenda. Did anyone have any other questions? Chris, or Casey, you were, I think you mentioned last time we met that you'd be willing to set up an ingest platform device to pull traffic in from the relays that are discoverable with the DNS. I don't think we arranged something that week, and it was kind of a busy month for me.
Yeah.
But
Maybe.
do you want to set up a working session to try and bring one of those up in your network or in lab,
Yeah.
whatever?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me take a look at my calendar. Let me get the right window open.
This is basically the proof of concept work that we did with the four other ISPs. They set this up in lab. There was one that did it across their production network, but the receiver was still a lab setup. And yeah, I mean, if you're willing to do that, then I think that could be good. And we can bring up the relay connectivity.
Yeah, it looks like this Friday or Wednesday of next week are both pretty open for me right now.
All right. Yeah, I could do this Friday.
Okay.
Wednesday of next week. I think there's an event going on that week that I don't have yet on my schedule.
Well, let's
Yeah,
circle up after the meeting here and we'll pick a time on Friday.
sure. That sounds great. All right, cool. That'll be fun. All right then. I think that's about all I had. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, so a question. I wasn't able to join the second screen group meeting. Was there anything useful that came out of that? I'm just aware that group has been designing protocols for use like on a local network that have web
Yeah,
compatible security properties. So it made me
sure,
wonder what.
sure. Okay, good question. I think we had a reasonably interesting conversation there. I think it was pretty inconclusive. Um, they they did they had looked at some of the privacy considerations, but had not, as I recall, considered whether it was necessary to do things like disable it in private browsing mode, or uh, I think in terms of action items, it's probably right to circle back with them and see if those discussions ever go anywhere or went anywhere, or if they did any follow up. I think they had some other questions that I ended up I think they were more interested in, that were like as TLS connections to local devices, um, that ended up having some discussion on GitHub. Um, I think a few people that were in that meeting came to the TPAC discussion for Multicast, but they did not later join the group or attend this meeting, unfortunately. So I don't think I sufficiently interested them to actually get involved at this stage. Um, uh, so I still think there's some overlap in some of the privacy considerations, especially kind of discoverability of local traffic, like or of local devices, uh, sort of information exposure between the browser and devices on LAN. This is a concern that there was a presentation in MBOND at IETF from Tommy Pauly at Apple. Apple introduced in the last within the last I think it was the version before this one, so maybe about a year ago, some protections against local discovery, so that you have to have like user permission before an app can access APIs that do local network discovery operations. And some other sort of protections, like you can pre-register at build time to have to say what specific kinds of services or names you're going to be trying to discover with your application, and then Apple has some degree of control over the apps that are allowed to do that. Apparently, they saw some abuses from some SDKs, often that the apps didn't even know were doing sketchy things, but the SDKs were probing the local network in some ways, and so they locked down a number of local discovery sorts of things. You can take a look at. I think that was the first slot in MBOND at IETF this last time. So you can take a look at the notes for that. I can find the link to the video if you want to see it. I think that the second screen privacy considerations are of the same sort. Yeah, there's some overlap there, and just like what Tommy reported, it's not just Multicast itself, but the sort of local device communication and discovery issues. He didn't talk about what the actual abuse was, like what the danger to users was, but there's a sort of abundance of caution, I think, for things that are doing poorly understood, whatever is going on, this sketchy try to discover information about your user and their network environment. There's a principle of data minimization or something that you don't just want to expose all this stuff. Yeah, they seemed like they're in a reasonably similar place. There's like they haven't really got much of an answer. They don't really know what the threat model is that they need to protect against. Yeah, I didn't see anything that was super helpful. I was hoping they had already just sort of solved this problem. But I think it's some indication that the local network part is not necessarily what people are worried about, at least right now, although I'm not sure it's what they shouldn't, it's a thing they shouldn't be worried about. But in terms of browser security and the feedback that people have gotten yet, yeah, I feel like there's a sort of big gap here where nobody really has a great understanding of what's necessary to actually achieve. And so there's you know, so far I think it's been driven more by responses to abuses. But we're seeing people push back on things that open up just new information that's exposed. Because every new piece of information that's exposed has some kind of fingerprinting, at least, and maybe starts to present new threat models that we don't know what they are. And so, in that sense, it just sort of continues raising the bar for what all needs to happen in terms of answering all the security questions. So I didn't feel like it ended up being as useful as I was hoping. I'm not sure it was useless, but I don't think I walked away with like follow-up actions on this.
Okay.
So yeah. Yeah, good question though. I did meet with them. I went to their session, and some of the people that were there came to my session. But I think we're not really looking at the same problem.
Okay,
just a small
right,
overlap
yeah.
on some of the privacy considerations. So it might be good to see what they land on, to keep an eye on that. You know, and whether it's a problem for them in the course of time. But and it might inform our later security considerations, I think. But I don't really know what to do with it beyond that right now.
Okay.
All right. Then thank you very much, and I think we'll wrap it up a few minutes early. Nothing else.
Thanks, guys.
And yeah, I'll send you an email, Casey. We'll talk about Friday. All right, thanks.
Sounds good.
Great.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Chris, for the notes. Really appreciate that again.
No worries. No worries. It's
Yeah.
fine.